good morning again to everyone, and thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. And you're listening to Ronalia Sahadio, Optimus Senior Consultant in Dynamics. And this morning we're going to be looking at purchase order processing. Once we have adequate time, we will also touch a bit on requisition and workflow. But Optimus does have a full training webinar on workflow on the 28th of this month, which is next week. Now, just a couple notes for you all. You all can hear me, but attendees are on mute. The purpose of that is so that your background noises don't affect the training. You do have either a chat or a QA section you will see within your Zoom meeting if there are questions you need to ask. So you can go ahead and use that if you need to. So we'll delve right into the training. And just a summary of what we'll be covering this morning. We'll be looking at standard purchase order entry, which is the most commonly used type of entry. And we're going to look at purchase order entry with both inventory and non-inventory items. And we have a question from Dennis, which version of GP are we looking at? And we are looking at GP2018R2. Okay, the next section that we'll be looking at is receiving on the purchase order. And when we're receiving, there are two types of receiving. We may have a shipment or a delivery with no invoice, so we may have a delivery note, so that is shipment only. And then we may have a shipment with invoice. So at first we look at shipment with invoice, and following that we look at shipment with no invoice. And then once there's a shipment with no invoice, it means that the invoice will come to us later on, and we then need to get that invoice into the system and match it with the shipment that was previously entered. So we look at that as well. We'll talk just a bit on reporting. And one additional item we look at is blanket POs. And a blanket PO, an example would be if you have a contract for service or a contract for delivery of items across a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And as I said, if we do have adequate time, we will look briefly at requisition and workflow. And the reason we are touching on requisition is because requisition actually comes before purchase order. It is a somewhat new area in GP. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. So first of all is entering the purchase order. And for entering the purchase order, we go to purchase order entry. Okay, so one attendee is telling me they're not hearing. Can you all please message in the chat and let me know if you are hearing? And of course, you can only message if you're hearing me. It's another message. Okay, so that person can now hear us. All right. Okay, so it may have been a setting on that individual's machine. Okay, so thank you all for your responses. All right, so First screen we're going to look at is purchase order entry. This is where we enter the purchase order. And as you can see, my screen has come up on type, standard type purchase order. And if I were to drop down on type, you see we have several types of POs here. Standard would be generally the type of PO that you would create on a daily basis. And let me just speak briefly about the other types. Drop ship would depend, not many business types will use drop ship. Drop ship would be used where you are in a business of distributing and you may have a manufacturer or distributor as well as delivering to you. You may be out of stock of an item and you enter a drop ship PO. It goes to your distributor directly to be delivered to your customer versus coming into your warehouse. And a blanket is what I said we look at on towards the end of today's training. A blanket PO would be a contract for services or delivery across a period of time. So this sort of PO allows you to print a delivery schedule that goes along with the PO that will go to your vendor. And of course, a dropship blanket is a combination of those two that we just spoke about. Right, so the system gives you a PO number, and generally we accept that PO number. Some of you do choose to override it, and you can override it if you wish. If you have buyers listed in your system, you can select a buyer. All right, so I'll look up for my vendor. For this PO, I'm going to use advanced. And for this PO, I'm going to show you entering an inventory item as well as a non-inventory item. Inventory item means if I go to my lookup list here across from item, I will be able to see the item, search my list and find the item. A non-inventory item could be, let's say you're purchasing furniture. That will not be on your inventory list. That's not being managed in inventory. If you're purchasing a service, such as cleaning service, that might not be on your list, right? Because that is not an inventory item. So if we are purchasing a non-inventory item, it's not on our list, therefore, we just type it in. Right? And the unit of measure will be, for instance, cases, boxes, how many. In this case, we are using each. And I'm going to purchase one desk. And because this is not an inventory item, it's not in our system, there's no cost stored in the system for this particular item. So I will enter a cost. Of course, you can type upper or lowercase, whichever you wish. Right, and then we have our list of sites here. So I can scroll and select from the list, or Dynamics GP has a memory. So if I want from the warehouse, I type W, notice warehouse comes up. And that is it for this line item. Now, before I move on to the next line item, I'm just going to quickly show you one thing. Now, there's a lot of integration happening in Dynamics GP. So for instance, purchasing is integrated with so many different areas in GP. It's integrated with fixed assets, with inventory, of course, because when you buy items, it needs to be added to inventory. It's integrated with general ledger, because when we receive on items, it creates GL entries and that goes across to general ledger. And not so much purchasing, but payables is integrated with accounts receivables. And another integration is project accounting. So for instance, if you're a client, you're on project accounting, we would have the project accountant purchase order screen turned on. And what that means, we just see a couple more fields here, one called project, one called cost category, where we can be purchasing items that goes directly to a project. Now, as I said, this line is complete. But if I wanted to check on more information for this line, across from item, there's a blue arrow, which we call an expansion. And that takes us to the item detail window. And why I brought you here, what I wanted to show you, I just mentioned that purchasing is linked to different areas, and one of those areas is fixed asset. So let's say this desk, and usually a desk is a fixed asset. If this desk was a fixed asset item, we simply come into this secondary window and we select capital item. And by selecting capital item, what that does, it triggers to the system that this is a fixed asset item. And when we receive on this purchase order, it actually takes the item across to the fixed asset module to be received into that module as well, right? So we're not showing fixed asset today, but I just sort of mentioned that to you. Also in this window, we see some in-house dates here and some vendor dates here. So for instance, you can enter your required date that you want to receive this item, and you could enter a promised date that the vendor promised you the item for, right? Also, a little lower down, there's an area called landed costs. Now, if your business type is purchasing inventory for resale, and you are purchasing from overseas, it means that you will incur landed costs. It's shipping, insurance, handling fees, all of those fees, landed costs can be assigned and apportioned to the items you're purchasing. All right. So as I said, it was simple enough. We are finished with the first line and we are on to the next line item. And so the first line was a non-inventory item. The next line item, I'm going to purchase an inventory item, which means it exists in our system or it's going to be added to our system. I'm going to look up and I'm going to select processor. Right. Now unit of measure didn't come up by default. And let's see what options we have. We have two options and it's each. When we are purchasing a non-inventory item, the system always understands the unit of measure to be each, hence the default earlier when we were purchasing the desk. For the second item that I selected, there are actually two that we could have chosen from. Hence, we have to go to the lookup and select which one of the unit of measures we wanted. Okay, so here I'm going to purchase two processors, and notice a unit cost did come up, and a unit cost came up because this item is stored in our system on the inventory side and it's stored at a price. The site entered on the first line item is what is set to default. However, if you're an organization that has multiple sites, which means multiple areas you want items delivered to, or multiple areas that you store items, you can enter multiple sites on a single field. So if I wanted to enter any one of these sites from my lookup, any one of these sites from my lookup list, I could enter those, right, on the same field. And our PO is actually complete and we are ready to print. And notice that you have an email button at the top. So if you wanted to email this purchase order, you could. And there's an attach button. If there are certain documents that you want to attach to a purchase order, you could. So go on to print and we'll be prompted to save. Now this is a very standard PO within GP. And of course, if we are creating a purchase order for you, we will input your logo here, your address, etc. And of course, this layout can be changed to suit your requirements. All right, so I'm just going back to the PO and taking note that the PO number was 2078. And so our purchase order is done. And we're moving on to our next step now, which is receiving against the purchase order. And there are two ways that we can receive in GP. From the transaction entry area in GP, we can go to receiving transaction entry. However, you have other options as well. So a lot of people like to go into the PO, so they bring up the PO in the PO entry screen, and then you can go to action, receive, or receive an invoice. Now remember I mentioned earlier, we have receiving with invoice and receiving, and there's no invoices yet. So we're going to use the second option, receive an invoice. And what this does, it takes us to the receiving transaction entry window, and it also launches the secondary window where we actually go straight to the vendor and straight to the PO because we came in from the PO entry screen. We were already on this PO number and already on this vendor. And GP allows us to do partial receipts. It means I don't have to select both items and I don't have to receive these quantities here. I could receive if I wanted to a smaller quantity. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead and receive the desk, and for the processor, now they're both selected by default and I can unselect. For the processor, I'm going to receive, say that I received an invoice for one of the items. Right? So now when we have finished this entry, it means that the purchase order has been partially received on because there's still one item remaining. Okay, so notice we came in straight from the purchase order window and we selected receive and it took us to the receiving window. There was no additional data entry that had to be done. The only information that has to be entered here is the vendor's invoice number, and that's it. So you basically bring in the information from the PO, you verify your information, and you enter your vendor invoice number. So I'll take a note of the numbers. All right. Notice the system also gave us a receipt number. So I'm taking note of these numbers. So if we need to come back to the document, right? So all I did again was enter the vendor invoice number. Let's look at one other item on the screen. If I were to go to the distribution button, notice my inventory account has been debited because I've received inventory, right? I've received a service as well. And then my accounts payable account has been credited. Because we have a shipment invoice, it means that when I post on this receiving entry, it does not only update inventory, it also updates accounts payable because it means the invoice has been created in this vendor document number. And of course, the general ledger is updated with the entries that we saw in distribution. And of course, if you need to change your entries, you can go ahead and change your entries as well before posting. Now, in Dynamics GP, we have both transaction level posting and batch level posting. Notice there's batch ID here, which I left blank. If I were to input a batch ID, then I will go to the batch, I can review, I can print an edit list and then post, or we can transaction level post, which means from this screen we can select it. Right? And once I close the window, my posting journals will print. So I'll just print the first two. Right? So our receiving posting journal basically is a summary of all the information that was on our entry screen. And then there's our distribution journal that is showing the GL entries and how they have been split that is going across to the general ledger. And notice there's an audit trail code, which of course you'll find in the GL. So let us say I wanted to look up or inquire on these documents. We had a purchase order and we had a receipt. So I can go to the inquiry area under purchasing and purchase order document. And I took note of the purchase order number. And it was 2078, but I should also find it to the end of my list as well. And I select redisplay. And so we can see our purchase order and we see the related shipment because it is linked to the purchase order. Now, if I were to go into the purchase order, notice the status is saying release. Okay, so we're gonna go through a couple steps where we'll see that status is going to change. right? And if we needed to look up our shipment invoice, we can do so as well. And we can look up all the entry information, distribution, landed costs, any information that was entered against it. Now, if I were to go, remember that this PO has been partially received. If I were to go into a smart list report, I should be able to see a report showing my open purchase orders. So smart list is a list of transactions or list of lines. If I go under the purchasing area, and let's look at open purchase orders report, and I put this in number order. Notice I'm seeing my purchase order 2078 and the status is release. I'm going to minimize that. And let's say we have liaised with the vendor and we have determined that we ordered two processors, only one has been delivered, the vendor is out of stock, so they're not going to be delivering the second processor. And we decide we want to go ahead and close out that purchase order. And if we want to close out our purchase order, we should go to edit purchase order under the transaction area and look up our purchase order number. Now notice the status is saying release. If we are to look at the line items, we're seeing the line in relation to the desk is closed because it has been fully received against. Whereas the line in relation to the processor is saying release. Now, if I were to change quantity canceled and cancel one item, notice the status of the line now changes to close. And I go ahead and I select process. Right? So to look up that PO again and link to that PO, you'll see the purchase order status is now saying close. Now remember, I was looking at a smart list open report, and by the way, our journal prints of what action occurred. And we were looking at our smart list report, where this is the open purchase orders report. And if I were to click refresh, that PO is no longer on this report because it's no longer an open purchase order. And just a note for you all that are on Dynamics GP currently, you are supposed to be going through the status, this window, sorry, edit purchase order status on, let's say, a monthly basis and closing off POs that are not going to be received again. Okay, so if you know the vendor is not going to be delivering, you can go ahead and close those POs. Because if you are an organization that generating a lot of POs daily, it means you're going to have a large amount of open purchase orders. And if you were to report on that large amount of purchase orders, it really wouldn't give you a realistic view of what is pending because a lot of them are just not going to be delivered. All right, so now we're going to create another purchase order because we have completed the first purchase order. We have received against it and we have closed out the partial area that was unreceived. So we're going to create a new purchase order for the purpose of showing you receiving against a shipment, not a shipment invoice as we saw earlier, and matching that shipment later on a later date to an invoice. So again, it's going to be a standard purchase order. We're going to use vendor is. And I'm looking for a particular item, right? Monitors. So these are inventory items. And I'll be ordering 5 monitors. So main site warehouse. And we're on to the next line item. And we're going to be purchasing 3. And again, warehouse has defaulted because we had warehouse on our first line. Our PO number is 2079. And this PO is actually complete. So we're going to go on to the next step, which is receiving a shipment only, no invoice. So as I said, we can go through from this window or we can go from the transaction entry window. It takes us to the same place. So once I go to action and receive, it means I'm receiving without an invoice, as an invoice is the second option. And the system will ask me to save the PO. And it takes us to the receiving window. Now, when we go to this receiving window, notice we're not only seeing PO 2079 that I just entered, we're seeing other POs under this vendor that are available to be received upon, which means they're still open. So whenever I'm entering a receipt in the system, it does not have to be limited to entering one receipt for one PO. For any PO, we can have multiple receipts because the items can be delivered across a period of time, not all at once. And for any receipt that we're entering, we can be receiving on multiple POs from a vendor. So a vendor might be owing us items from a previous PO and send them in the shipment with PO number 2. So we have that mix and match that we can do in the system as well. Now, because I came in from PO 2079, that is the PO that is selected in the state for me. And I'm only going to receive, I'm not going to receive on the first item, I'm going to receive on the second item. Now, just to mention, GP also includes serial and lot tracking. So if we were receiving an item that has a serial or lot number, we would be prompted to enter what the number is to be stored in the system. And when it comes to lot numbers, we also have lot expirations that can be tracked in GP. So I'm just taking note of our receipt number. And I am going to input our invoice number. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, we could enter a batch if we wanted to, or we could transaction level post. Just to remind you all, we are entering a shipment. There's no invoice. It means we have received items from our vendor, but they have not sent an invoice. They may have sent a delivery note. And I'm going to go ahead and post. And of course, once I close the window, our journals will print just as it did earlier. So our posting journal. So we've had the PO, we have had the receipt, which is a shipment only. And now we want to go ahead and match the receipt with the invoice now that we have received at a later date. Just to show you, if I go back to that vendor, which was East, if I were to inquire on that vendor's account, I would not see my invoice number that I've entered. And my invoice number is 6743. And if we look through here, we will not see 6743 because we have not received or posted an invoice yet. So now we go to the enter match invoices window. And again, we will receive a receipt number. And all of these are trails in the system when you're going back to look up information. And once I select the vendor, and I select auto invoice, it takes me to the POs that are available to be invoiced to this vendor. And just as we saw earlier, more than one PO displayed in the receiving window. Similarly, all POs that are available or open under this vendor or shipments will show up. So we are actually dealing with purchase order 2079. And select invoice, and I'll put in my invoice number. So my last number was 6743. I'm going to use 6745. Previously, it's actually a delivery note we entered against the shipment entry, and we're now entering our invoice number 6745. Let's take a look at the distributions. And the distributions show us that we are affecting payables and we are affecting accrued purchases. And the reason we are affecting accrued purchases, when we enter the shipment, it did not go to payables, it went to inventory and it went to accrued purchases. And now that we have actually received the invoice, it moves from accrued purchases to accounts payable. I'll go ahead and post. We look at the invoice posting journal and the invoice distribution. So again, our posting journal basically shows a summary of what was on the entry screen, the items, the values, and the distribution shows us what is going across to the general ledger. Now, if you were to again go to the travel account and I were to redisplay, I should be able to find my invoice now. So here is my invoice 6745 that has just been entered. And I can actually drill into that invoice and see the entry just as it was displayed earlier. So that area that we just looked at covers purchase order, receiving with an invoice, receiving without an invoice. I'm now going to move on to blanket PO, and I should mention blanket PO is not used daily, and blanket PO is more used for contract purposes or scheduled deliveries. So before I move on to blanket PO, I'm just going to give you all 10 seconds if there's any question that you want to ask at this point before we move on. So remember, if you have any questions, you can type it in the chat. Okay, so I think everyone is good because I didn't see any questions pop up. So we will move on to blanket purchase order. Now a blanket purchase order is entered in the same purchase order entry window that we were in earlier. All we simply do is drop down. Instead of the default of standard, we drop down to blanket. All right, we select our vendor. And I'm going to create a blanket purchase order for an item to be delivered. But remember, I mentioned as well, you can do it for a service. Let's say it's cleaning service or some other kind of service that you want the vendor to come in monthly to perform on a periodic basis. I'll select 120 of the item. And where I want to deliver to warehouse. So a blanket PO generally, it's one line item for the total amount. So in my example, I want 120 of this item delivered across a treatment period. So I just enter the entire amount, 120, and then I select blank at the top of my screen. Okay, and so I'll go to the first line, and I'll say I want 50 in my first delivery. My next line, I want 50. My second delivery, and I'm going to change the date for my second delivery. And the next line, I want the remaining 20. And again, on a different date. Now we see that release is selected by default. Release means we are ready to send the PO for this amount to the vendor. We have two options in this case. We can send the PO to the vendor with the full amount, but broken down as we're seeing them on the screen, or we can say that we just want to release the order for this month. Okay, so back on the purchase order, I'm going to select print, and just a reminder, we can email as well. I'm going to select print, and notice there's an option here to print delivery schedule. So we're going to print the delivery schedule, which is going to show the 3 time periods that we want the items delivered. So this is our delivery schedule, and it's showing the 3 dates and the amounts we want the item delivered. Notice there's a warning that this is not a purchase order, it is a delivery schedule. And if I were to again go back to my purchase order, and then I'll want to print the actual purchase order, I'll print the screen. So our purchase order shows one line item, and the reason is because I only selected that I want to release the order for April. I'm not ready to release the others. So we send this order along to the vendor, along with the delivery schedule as well. And notice there's a required date on the PO. So if we wanted to select release against the 3 orders and have the 3 items and 3 line items and have them display on the PO, we could do that as well, and they would show the respective required date. Right? When it comes to receiving against the blanket purchase order, we basically go through the same processes we went through earlier. So now I'm moving away from purchase order processing because we do have a bit of time. And I'm going to speak a bit about requisition and workflow. As I mentioned, one of my colleagues is hosting workflow training on the 28th, which is next week. So you will get more information on workflow during that training. The only reason I'm touching on workflow today and requisition is because requisition is related to purchasing. Now, it's only a couple of years ago that Dynamics has released the requisition module for GP. Previously, our starting point was the purchase order area. And now we can actually start with a requisition, and a requisition flows to a purchase order, and a purchase order flows to an invoice. Now, in addition to being able to enter a requisition in the system, there is the added functionality where there can be a workflow behind the requisition, meaning you electronically submit to someone to approve. Likewise, there can be workflow with the purchase order that we just saw. We can electronically submit that for someone to approve as well. So let's just touch on the workflow area. It's under the administrator area. And if we were to look at workflow maintenance, you would see that there are workflows for a lot of areas in GP. And with each release of GP, more and more workflows have been added, right? So there's batch approval and GL account approval. Under financial, we have workflows under sales, etc. And we actually have the most workflows under the purchasing area, so payables and purchasing. So notice you have workflows for receiving, for invoice matching, for requisition and for purchase orders. Now, I'm just going to look at the requisition aspect of it, but whatever we look at here, we can actually apply to purchase order approval as well. So this is the requisition workflow that I have set up, and we can have as many approval steps as we want. So for instance, this workflow, I've just added 2 steps, and if you would notice from my tree view, they are 2 parallel steps. So they can be one step after the other, or they can be parallel. So in my workflow rule, I've just created a simple one, but we can get more complex. My first step is always send to manager for approval. And manager here is a Windows user. So approvals for workflow does not need to be a GP user. Likewise, requesters for requisition does not need to be a GP user. We have a low-cost user, and it's called a self-service user. And also, there's approval from within email. So you don't have to go into Dynamics to approve. So the first step, always send to manager. And my second step, which is actually parallel to the first step, right, when the requisition is for department IT, send to manager too as well. Right? And of course, I could have put here, and I'm sure if you are using it, you will need to probably put a step for a dollar value. So for instance, I could have said, when the document amount, meaning the requisition amount, exceeds a certain value, then go to manager 3. And I could have in between value, and then if it exceeds that value, then go to manager 4. So for my example, it's pretty basic, but we can get a little more complex as well in terms of the dollar value thresholds. And each department can go to a different manager because we want each department requisition to go to that department's manager. So that could be included as well. If I were to go into requisition entry, which as you see, it's a range before the purchase order because the requisition comes before the PO. So let's say I'm purchasing another desk. Right, I'll select where I want to ship to. And I misspoke, I'm not purchasing, I'm requesting. So this is a user requesting something, and it may or may not be approved by the managers. And if it's not approved, it does not progress to be converted to a PO. So I'll select my department. So in this case, I'm purchasing a non-inventory item, and I could requesting, sorry, and I could also request an inventory item because my inventory lookup is here. Right? Now, a lot of times, requester will not know the cost of an item. They're simply making a request. And the system does allow you to have 0 amount on the PO because it's a given that requesters will not always know the price of an item. And they may also not always know vendor. And the vendor could be left blank, and the person making the purchase will input that rest of information. This is my requisition. And once I've reviewed my requisition, by the way, I could always save the requisition and come back to it. So let's say I save it. Right? Notice there's a ribbon at the top saying not submitted, and the workflow name, my workflow name is test, right? And it's not been submitted. So now I'll click submit. And usually we will be prompted to send a note to the approver. And if I were to look up my requisition again, notice step 1 is in train, pending approval by manager, and there's a due date that has been set on the workflow. If I were to go into view history, you see my note when it was submitted, and you see that it has been sent to manager and it's pending, and also to manager too, because it's a parallel step and is pending. And once those persons approve, this requisition can be converted to a purchase order, which again reduces data entry because what was entered on the requisition is accepted into the purchase order screen. Okay. So I'm seeing one question. Okay, so we are actually finished in this area. If you all have any questions regarding requisition and workflow, please let me know. And I'm seeing one question. If we can show releasing one item at a time. I'm not sure if this is in relation to the blanket PO or the standard PO. So Melissa, if you can respond, is it via typing in the chat, is it blanket PO or standard? Okay, so it's blanket. Okay, so no problem, I can show that again. Okay, so we are finished in the requisition and workflow area, but if you all have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat. So let's just go through the blanket purchase order again briefly. Okay, so this was the blanket purchase order that I created. And here we show that only one line was released. And when we only, so let me just mention again, sorry if I'm moving too fast. When you bring the purchase order on the window, you click the blanket button at the top of the window. And so this takes you to the window where you will set out what the delivery schedule will be like in terms of dates and amounts. And I have only selected one line item to be released, and therefore one line item printed on the PO. Right? Right, so one line item printed on the PO. And let's see if I were to go on to the next line item. Now I believe if I select the next line item, both are going to print on the PO. Yeah, so both line items are going to print on the PO. So the one that would have been previously sent out or delivered on, and then the new line item. What I suggest, however, is you release all items upfront, because as we saw, a delivery schedule is going where we see the required date on the PO. So I've now set all to release. Good. And so the PO shows, on the PO, you see a delivery schedule there with the various required dates. And what you can do is you can send this purchase order along with the delivery schedule as well, so that the vendor understands that it's scheduled shipments that has to come, and that all these items on one date. So Melissa, let me know if that answered the question or if there was something else you were looking for. Okay, so Melissa responded already. So she found the step based on what I just showed. All right, is there any more questions? Any of you have questions? So I'll just hold on 1 minute if you all have any questions, and if you don't, we'll be ending off for today. All right, so while I'm waiting, just to let you all know, as I mentioned, requisition is a pretty new area in GP. Before requisition being introduced in was introduced in GP, we were using, and we are still using, in some cases, third parties for requisition modules. So now you can have it within GP, and it actually is part of your GP user license. So it's not an additional software purchase to have access to the module. However, the users are self-service users, which are very light users in GP, and there will be a small purchase for those user licenses. So please reach out to us and let us know if you're interested in requisition, if you're interested in workflow. If you don't have purchasing, and if you're interested in purchasing, we'll be happy to assist you. So I'm not seeing any more questions. So we'll end off there for today. And thank you so much to everyone for attending today. And thank you for your time. Please contact Optimus if there are any questions or queries. Take care, everyone.